So yes, and of course we have a guest who is the epitome of that thought process of being a change she wishes to see in the world. And that's Barbara Spang-Minsker, professor, engineering professor at the University of Illinois. And of course I had her in last week and we talked about joyful you and mindfulness. Well, we didn't get too much into mindfulness, but we did do the canning jar. That's right. So yes, we're with purpose, and I still have I have my canning jar on my desk, and I look at it every day. And there's been a few days that I actually have said, okay, I'm going to my creativity rock, so I'm going to create today.
Excellent.
So I'm working towards doing it daily. So,
Nice.
and being mindful of daily creativity in my life. So thank you, Dr. Barbara. I always like to call her Dr. Barbara. So it's so much better than Professor Barbara or something. I don't know what it is.
It's just Barbara.
Yes, I don't know what it is. I always feel like I have to have some type of surname or something like that. Like I have to say Miss So-and-so or,
Yeah.
I think it's, and the thing is, that's something like people do in the South.
Yeah.
I didn't grow up in the South, and my parents didn't really grow up in the South. My dad did, but my mom didn't. So I don't know where I got that sensibility from, but for some reason it's always like Miss or Mr. or Doctor, or so. I always have to have some type of title before a person's name. Like I just can't say their name without the title or something. So I gotta work on that some more. Anyway, enough about me. You're listening to 90.1 FM WEFT Champaign. I'm Renee Angelah, and I'm in the studio with engineering professor Barbara Spang-Minsker. Joyful You, Discovering the Path to Success and Happiness, Mindful Living with Purpose and Resilience. And yes, I still have her book marked up, and we're going to just get right into this soulful interview, Health and Soulful Being. It will be played on Sunday at 9:30 p.m. on Channel 6 for Comcast users, Channel 99 for AT&T Uverse users. And we will continue this discussion on mindfulness. Welcome, Barbara. I got it.
Thank you, Renee.
Why don't we get right into the interview, and we were going to discuss mindfulness this week. So define mindfulness for you. What is your definition of mindfulness?
Yeah, the most commonly used definition is one that John Kabat-Zinn came up with a number of years ago, which is paying attention in the present moment.
Yes.
Non-judgmentally, meaning you're not judging what you're seeing, and doing it with intention and purpose, so that you're setting out to pay attention. And those different facets are very important in terms of what the studies have shown and the health benefits of mindfulness.
And how do you practice mindfulness without the judgment? It seems like that we all have something that we have an opinion about. How do you work towards not having that judgment?
Right. So the concept sounds fairly simple, but in practice, it's not.
Yes.
And it takes a lot of practice. It's really about training your mind to be this way. It's not about stopping the thoughts or the judgments from coming up. It's just about not paying so much attention to them when they do, so that you're able to find kind of a spacious place in your mind around all that crap that's always coming up, and all those stories and everything else. Those are still going to be there, but over time, as you pay less attention to them and just thank them for showing up, and they start to decline, come less frequently, your mind becomes more peaceful over time.
And that's sounds like the same type of thought process, or not thought process, but philosophy behind meditation. They say allow the thoughts to come, because they're going to come, but as times go by and you continue your meditation, it's less and less of those thoughts that flood your mind.
So meditation is basically practicing mindfulness in a formal setting.
All right.
So you can sit to practice, you can walk or do gentle movements like yoga, or that is all a type of meditation. And then mindfulness is broader. You can bring mindfulness throughout your day no matter what you're doing. You're always bringing your attention back to the present moment.
Is there a difference between focus and mindfulness, or are those very similar?
There's all different kinds of mindfulness and all sorts of practices. And one of those is concentration, where you're concentrating, like, say, focusing in on a flame and watching that flame, right? And that kind of practice can be helpful for building some strength in terms of your mind being able to stay focused on something, but it can also be taken too far because ultimately you don't want your mind so locked in. You want it to be very open and spacious.
Okay. Yes, I know when I was taking classes over at the School of Metaphysics, one of the first things they had us do was a concentration exercise with the flame, and so we had to concentrate for 10 minutes a day on this flame, and I noticed that at times I would be moving, swaying with the flame. I was so focused, so I'm just over here like this, and the flame is moving, and then you get so focused that the eyes start playing tricks on you or something, so then the flame looked like it was separating. So you're seeing all these shadows around the flame, but it did actually help me towards meditating more and being able to sustain the meditation without just, because we also had to log like how many times we lost our focus. So you almost became mindful because you were logging, you were doing little slashes every time a thought came, and so as time goes by, then
you could see how there are fewer.
Yes,
see your progress.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that was a really good exercise especially for me, because I'm always
be making an awful lot of slashes. Though.
Yeah. I had like hundreds.
Yeah. But then your attention can become more. It can kind of interrupt the flow if you take it too far. I mean, I could see how for a brief period, just sort of get the idea.
Yes.
But ultimately, you'd want to move away from
I actually did stop, because it seemed like the more I started slashing, then the more thoughts would keep coming.
That's right, because you're reinforcing.
Yeah, so I actually pulled back on some days. I didn't even do that, because it was just like, okay, this is too much trying to concentrate and on the slash, and then another thought seems to come up behind that.
Yeah.
And so it was more for me an experimentation. Just
sure.
So
Definitely.
So mindfulness and meditations and focus. As we go more towards mindfulness, what techniques can one integrate in their personal and professional lives to be more mindful?
Yeah, so practicing mindfulness doesn't have to be a really big deal where you're sitting for hours at a time and staring at the mountain. It can be really popped into a busy life wherever it fits. So I sometimes will meditate for 5 minutes between 2 meetings, and it just refreshes my mind so that I'm able to move on to the next meeting with a clear head.
Okay.
And by doing this and doing it on a regular basis, I've been practicing for about 5 years now, and that regular practice where I'm actually sitting down and focusing on it, it's kind of like going to the gym is for your body, where you're getting in shape so that the rest of the day you're able to focus better and be in the moment for whatever you're doing.
Yes.
A conversation like we're having, I'm using mindfulness right now, especially since I'm on live air. There's a few thoughts of nervousness coming up, and I can use the mindfulness to see that they're there, but not really get caught up in them, and just stay open and spacious instead. So it's really very flexible in terms of how you fit it into your life and whatever makes it work.
And speaking of life, you had a philosophy in your book about life as a flowing stream.
Right.
I have to find that page. But I'm going to let you describe that philosophy while I find a page. The philosophy behind life as a flowing stream.
Yeah, so we talked last time about rocks, pebbles, and sand.
Yes.
And the mayonnaise jar metaphor, which I've turned into the engineering professor in the canning jar instead. And the rocks are the things that are really important to you, your health, your loved ones. The pebbles are the things that are maybe less important, and the sand is all the other crap that you have to deal with. So I think of life and all the opportunities that life offers us, whether they're, we view them as positive or negative, right? There's so much coming along that we have to deal with as sort of this rushing stream that's coming past. And what things are we going to deal with? Because there's always more than we can possibly handle, especially today in our information age, where not only is there life around us, but there's all this stuff online that is just overwhelming. So reaching into that stream and pulling out the rocks that are most important to us is the first thing to do. And then squeezing in the pebbles and the sand in between the rocks. So we make room for the rocks first, because if we try to do that later, they don't fit. So that's where the metaphor comes from, and it's a lot of, you can't control a stream. You can't stop a stream. And life, really, you can't control it, you can't stop it. It keeps going. So to allow that to be and let some of that stuff go by is where the metaphor is coming from. And just to give you a concrete example, on my email, I used to try to always be catching up on the email. I had to have an empty inbox, and that was like nirvana, right, was the empty inbox. But I get about 100 email messages a day as a professor, and now I have Joyful You on top of that, and I can't possibly keep up with that. So I've gone through various stages of systems to deal with that. And my most recent one is I just let the email stream right on by, and I scan through the subjects, I look at what do I need to deal with, I pull it up, I answer it, and then I let the rest just trickle by. And so it's literally an email stream flowing past.
Oh, I love that whole thought process of streaming and streamlining, basically, so that in simplifying.
Because even sorting them all out, it takes extra time, and I realized don't have time for it. So it's a huge amount of freedom not to be trying to control that email anymore.
I recently just started not really getting a whole lot on my email or Facebook or all of that kind of stuff. So I go to those avenues once or twice a week, and I find that I'm a lot less stressed than trying to look at every day, just unless I know that I sent out an email to somebody and then I look at it to see if they responded. But all the other stuff, I'm like, okay, if you don't catch me, you know, wait a week. Because it just
so much
was
of that,
overwhelming.
They're pebbles. And there's too many of them.
Exactly.
So something has to go.
And then I have one email where I just completely use for all that junk mail. You know, that everybody always asks you what your email address is so they can send you coupons. And I'm like, okay, when I want a coupon to pay less, then I'll go to that email and look and see if they have a coupon. But it's like, I couldn't deal with all of that coming in on one email address. Like you said, when you're getting hundreds of emails, you really have to start kind of streamlining and simplifying. What are some other ways that you can simplify your life so that it can be a smoother running stream? And you can pick up more of the pebbles.
Well, Christmas has been a big one for me. Every year I've simplified how I handle the Christmas holidays. And this year I took a pretty radical step. I actually just wrote a blog about it. I decided I wasn't going to decorate my house, and I wasn't going to bake any cookies.
Oh boy, she's getting rebellious. No cookies!
No cookies. And this is a big tradition for me. I used to spend hours and hours baking all different kinds of cookies, and I would give them away to people as gifts. And they appreciated them, and I thought, that's kind of special because it's handmade. But oh my gosh, so much time. And when my kids were young, it was something that we did together. And it was fun, and I don't know if I've talked with you about the 5 love languages.
Yes, we have talked about the
okay.
5 love languages.
So my love language is quality time and conversation. So making cookies with my kids was, that was love right
Yes.
there. Now my kids are teenagers. They still love to eat the cookies,
But they don't
they're
wanna
not
make
so
it.
excited about making the
That's
cookies.
right.
So I told them each, I had been scaling back how many I was making, and this year I said, okay, I'm happy to make some cookies if you guys want to make them with me, but otherwise, I'm not doing any cookies this year. We're going to Grandma's for Christmas. Grandma will have cookies,
Yes.
so they'll get their cookies, but I'm not doing them. And so my house is dark, and I thought, I had thought that was going to be depressing because I love the lights at Christmas, but it hasn't been at all. I've just been loving the freedom of not having all that stress
Yes.
of getting everything done. There's still all the things I still need to get gifts for people.
Right.
I also told my husband next year we're doing an electronic newsletter for the family instead of Christmas cards.
Oh, that's
I'm done
cool.
with that. So I'm done.
Oh my gosh, that is
So-
such a great idea.
Well, it's better for the planet.
Yes.
And a whole lot less time stuffing and licking.
Right. And going to buy the Christmas cards and making sure you get them out by Christmas
Yeah,
or
we
before
send
Christmas.
out about 70 of these things, so it's a big job.
Oh goodness, yeah.
Yeah.
So one e-newsletter would be
It would do the job just fine.
much simpler.
Yeah.
Oh, I just love that. I send e-cards to my friends in Canada, but I still send out the little paper cards. And I was just not this morning, but last night I was saying, oh, I got to get my Christmas cards out, and I'm late. I usually get them out the first week of December, and I'm just so late on everything.
Well,
and
a couple of years ago, we migrated to New Year's cards. So we send out New Year's cards now instead of Christmas cards.
Oh,
And
what
so
a
that
way-
kind of, because all the Christmas stuff is done, and then
Yes.
we can just do it more at our leisure.
Yes,
So that's
exactly.
already helped some.
That does. So it sounds like that you're really simplifying your life and getting that sand.
Just keep working at it.
Working
but
at that
there's
sand.
always more.
Yes, it is.
I always have to look, is this, it's the pebbles that are the hardest.
Yes.
Because they seem important, but you can't do everything that seems important.
Exactly.
So I always ask myself, what's the motivation behind me wanting to do this thing?
Okay.
Is it fear of something bad that might happen if I don't do this? People will be mad at me if I don't do
Right.
this. And a lot of times that's founded on, old baggage, that there's really nothing that's going to happen if I don't do this.
Yes.
If my house is not decorated, are my neighbors gonna stop talking to me? I don't think so.
Right.
And if
But
they
you
do,
think
then
so.
I probably don't want to talk to them anyway.
Exactly.
Right?
You probably don't want them as your neighbors or your friends. So.
That's right.
Well, I'm glad that you brought up the concept of baggage, because in your book, in chapter 9, you are talking about lightening your baggage. And you started off with this poem by Derek Walcott, and I really like this, that described you. So, and when I was reading it, I was like, I can see that. So I wanted to read it on air if you don't
go
mind.
for it.
So
Yeah.
this is a poem by Derek Walcott, and it's called Love After Love. And it's all about love on 90.1 FM WEFT, Champagne Soulful Thursday morning. This time will come when, with elation, you will greet yourself arriving at your own door, in your own mirror, and each will smile at the other's welcome and say, sit here, eat. You will love again the stranger who was yourself. Give wine, give bread, give back your heart to itself, to the stranger who has loved you all your life, whom you ignored for another, who knows you by heart. Take down the love letters from the bookshelf, the photographs, the desperate notes. Peel your own image from the mirror. Sit. Feast on your life. Isn't that wonderful? Look, I'm over here. I done banged the book. But isn't that just a wonderful, and I see that as I talk to you more and more of this self-love, and then it branching out and just expanding the love expanding more and more.
Yeah, because you can't really love other people if you don't love yourself.
Absolutely. And so many times, especially we as mothers, tend to put ourselves last in favor of everybody else, not just our immediate family, but extended. And
That's
you know, we are the nurturers, we're the caretakers, we're the centerers. So we take on that role
Yeah.
with fierce.
And that poem is one that Jan Smith, who's the director of the Center for Authentic Leadership, where I started this developmental journey,
Yeah.
she gave that to me early on, and she said, I read this poem and I thought of you. And at that time, one of her sessions, she would have these retreats 4 times a year. One of the participants said to me, you know that voice in your head that's always commenting all day long? She said, if you took that voice out of your head and you put it next to you into a person, would that person be your friend?
Wow.
And I said, oh my God, no. And so there was a whole journey there in terms of learning to accept myself and my humanness, really. And some of that actually is just, you know, if I make a mistake, that voice of judgment comes up.
Yes.
And to say, thanks very much, but I am whole and complete. And I'm a beautiful person,
Yes.
even though I'm human. And I forgive myself for being human. And just reaffirming that throughout the day whenever that negative voice comes up
Yes.
has really shifted that a lot.
That is very interesting to separate and say, okay, put this in a friend, and would that person be your friend if they're always attacking you, if they're always judging
Yeah.
you, if they're always saying what you're not doing
Yeah.
or what you're doing is not right.
Right.
And to see it from that angle, I've never heard of anyone put it in that type of perspective. To
Yeah,
take
wasn't
that,
that a beautiful way to say
that
it?
was, you know, I mean, I just love the fact of taking that out of your head and identifying it, because I think we as humans, we have to label something or identify it. We have to have some type of recognition to it. So
Yeah.
a lot of times when people are saying, oh, just disregard those thoughts, well, how can you?
Right.
if the thoughts are coming and you have nowhere to put them. So I like that concept. And I also think of it as you're talking about lightening the baggage of all of those thoughts, because like you said, sometimes they're from past baggage.
That's right.
So
That's
to
right.
have
So that voice is kind of an amalgam of all the voices from your past.
Yes.
Parents, teachers, anybody who was trying to help you learn as a child how to be a good human being by correcting you along the way. And so eventually we install that voice in our head, but some of us take that voice pretty seriously, you know, and along the way get the idea that we were failures
Right.
for every time that we made a mistake as a child
Yeah.
and had to be corrected.
And I'm going through that right now.
And so now our own voices are reinforcing that all
Yes.
the time. And so learning to love yourself is learning to forgive yourself
Oh my
for being human and making mistakes.
Yes. What are other things that you would think to lighten that baggage of your past voices? Because like I said, I'm experiencing that right now, and just listening to what you just said, I realized that may be what the problem is. I just recently started a position, a little temporary job, and it's one of those places of where they give you negative feedback. So they only tell you everything that you're doing wrong. And I remember in therapy, I was talking to my therapist on Tuesday, and he said, well, are they telling you anything that you're doing right? I said, no, they just bring me these sheets and say I did it wrong. And so I spend the whole time that I'm there feeling like a big failure, and then I go home feeling like that failure. I didn't think of that it might be also even though the voices aren't coming through clearly, but it's some of that childhood baggage that says you're not doing something right.
Right.
And then that adds to the feeling of depression or sadness or feeling like you're a failure or anything like that.
Have you thought about speaking up and asking for feedback on anything that you're doing right?
I haven't. It's
'Cause
one of
I'm
those
guessing
things.
you are.
I haven't. I've asked a couple of times of, am I doing all right? Because I want it to be clear.
Yeah.
But it's not a clarity, and I think that's what's another thing that's I'm having a problem with. Because one minute they're saying yes, you're doing all right, but then they bring me all these papers that says you're doing everything wrong, and now we want you to do this instead, and it's not very clear.
Yeah.
And so from that lack of clarity is really a hard position
Yeah.
to take.
Definitely. Well, one of the techniques that Jan taught me, who I mentioned
Mhm.
with the poem, was it's a type of journaling, and it's in that chapter about the baggage,
Yes.
where you journal on these triggers, the things that are upsetting you
Right.
today, and then do it in a way that really gets you into the emotion of the moment, and then you close your eyes and you ask yourself, what does this remind me of? And the first thing that pops into your head you go with, and it's typically some situation that happened in the past that was unpleasant. And then you do the same journaling process with that, of getting yourself into the emotion of that moment. And then the last two steps of it are really about healing that incident from the past, where you write to whoever was the authority figure
Yes.
involved about how you're feeling, how the way they handled it made you feel,
Right.
and then you have them write back to you, and it can be an apology, it's whatever you needed to hear from that person.
Okay.
And by doing this, your mind really doesn't have any sense of time. So these memories are stored there.
Right.
You're kind of rewriting those stories and giving them a bit more closure, an ending that's a little easier to live with,
Yes.
so that they lose their edge and they begin to be less of a trigger. And often you have to keep journaling on them. So
Right.
I just wrote a blog about some journaling that I did over Thanksgiving when I was feeling really blue, and then figured out through my therapist. So therapy is also a classical way of handling baggage.
The lightning
That I was
below.
actually angry about some things that were going on, and so working through that anger and through the journaling, discovering that the situation was reminding me of something that happened in first grade when my teacher put me in the corner.
Oh, wow. All the way back to first grade.
So
I
now
can-
I'm going back to heal that incident and address that, so that there'll be less of a trigger today.
Okay. I've heard of this kind of technique, but I've always done it in a trauma sense. So,
So, we think of this of, I didn't have any really horrible trauma as a child, so I shouldn't need this. But trauma is to the eye of the beholder, right?
Right,
And what
exactly.
can be trauma to a young child may look like just day-to-day life to an adult.
Yes.
Kids get in trouble all the time. We think it's pretty normal. But
Right.
they see it as, oh my God, life, this is terrible.
This is terrible, yes.
Yeah.
My goodness. Oh, so that is wonderful. Oh goodness, so much. And I can't seem to get through it all. So, as we're lightening the load, let's talk about resilience.
Yeah,
because,
let's do.
Yeah,
That's the last piece.
that's the last piece. Mindful living with purpose and resilience, lightening the load. So, define resilience.
Yeah, so resilience, life doesn't hand us what we necessarily wanted. So resilience is the ability to be able to bounce back from that, from whatever went wrong that wasn't necessarily what we wanted.
Yeah.
How quickly can you bounce back and continue on? So that's really what resilience is.
And you have 3 R's of resilience in your book. And let me see here.
Yeah, and I actually borrowed those
Yes.
from Glenn Schiraldi, who wrote a lovely book called The Complete Guide to Resilience. And he uses resilience techniques to train the military and try to avoid or recover from post-traumatic stress disorder.
Okay.
But they found that the techniques work for anyone suffering any kind of difficulty, not just mass trauma.
Yeah.
So the 3 R's are resistance, which is your ability to carry on. So we talked last time about how you set your compass in a certain direction.
Yes.
This is the way that I want to go. And most likely life's going to hand you something and going to make it hard to keep going in that
Right.
direction. So we hold, you know, if I say I want to make a difference in the world, there's many ways I can do that, but I'm going to keep going, doing something where I'm
Yes.
going to make a difference in the world. I'm not just going to fold the first time I run into an obstacle.
Right.
That's resistance.
That's resistance.
Then recovery is when something bad happens, that's the second R. How quickly can you get back up on your feet and keep going? So maybe you're going to go through a period of grieving or anger or some destructive habits that we slide into,
Yeah.
but how quickly can you come back from that? And then the last one is resourceful responding, where this is the creative part, and it's actually the fun part to figure out, okay, I ran into this problem. Now, how am I going to deal with that? And come up with a creative solution to keep going in the general direction that you set, but maybe in a different way.
Okay.
And I think this is the most important piece that
Yes.
makes it possible to get up and keep going, is by being creative and using a growth mindset.
Right.
So there's a wonderful book called Mindset that I really recommend. And a growth mindset means that you look at challenges as an opportunity to learn and to grow and to keep learning. Okay, that didn't work, so I got to figure out another way to do this. Maybe I
Right.
need to get some help, do some reading, find some resources, figure it out. It's not a failure. So the opposite mindset is a fixed mindset, which says, I was born with this much skills and talent, and that's what I've got, and so if I'm not able to do this, it just means I'm not good enough, and I'm done. But a growth mindset would say, okay, I just got to learn some more. I'm going to figure this out.
Yeah.
I'll make it work. So with the issues you're having in your job, a growth mindset would be to say, I can do this.
Yeah.
I'm going to figure it out. I'm going to talk to them. I'm going to get some feedback, find out what I'm doing right. Maybe this isn't the right job for me in the end, but at least trying to work at it for a while before giving up.
Yes, absolutely. Do you find that people actually do kind of follow these, just unknowingly follow these 3 R's, the resistance, the recovery, the resourceful responding?
Well, you kind of have to carry on in life,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But to people, to I guess recognize that process and also recognize the times when you're struggling are normal.
Yeah.
And everybody has those times. Everybody runs into obstacles. Everybody has baggage.
Yes.
And we all have to carry on. And we all think that, well, okay, maybe I shouldn't generalize, but, you know, I used to think everybody else has their act together, but I don't.
Oh, absolutely.
You know,
it seems like
and
the world is going around and
That's
spinning,
right.
and you're
Everybody
just
else seems to just have it all together.
Yes.
But no, they really don't.
right. Exactly. And I
They're
think
just pretending.
we're all going through what, Thomas More says, the dark night of the soul. And
That's right.
at some point in our lives, we've all kind of experienced that. And it's in that dark night of the soul where resilience, I think, is the most important. So how can people be more resilient and keep hold of that concept as they're going through that? As we were talking with William Jones earlier, and he was talking about the Trayvon Martin and these rash of killings. And before you came in, he had asked me the question about, what would you say to that mother to keep her going? The mother of Trayvon Martin, or some of these parents who have lost their kids, or just anybody who has dealt with a significant loss.
Yeah, and there's nothing that you can say that can fix that. Nothing.
That's what I
And
said.
so really just support and love and allowing them the space to grieve, because they do need time to
Yes.
grieve. And we don't always allow ourselves, recovery doesn't mean that you instantly pick up and you're cheery and carrying on.
Right.
You can still grieve and get that out, and you need to. And it may take months and even years.
Yeah.
Over time, it tapers off, when something like that happens.
Right.
But all of a sudden, I lost a good friend, and I would think I was fine. This was a couple months later, and I'd be walking in from the parking lot at work, and all of a sudden there I am just crying.
Yeah.
And it just comes back like that.
Yeah.
And that's okay to allow that to be. So I think in those situations that's really about allowing the space for the grieving for a while before even thinking about how are you going to pick up and carry your life on.
Yes.
And then some of that too is how do you find meaning from this? So you see so many parents who've lost a child to tragic circumstances, they turn it into a cause.
Like John Tesh.
Yeah.
Yes.
And they go out there and they try to make positive change in the world so that this will never happen to somebody else's child.
Absolutely.
That's resilience. So looking for those opportunities can be really helpful.
Yes. Oh my goodness. I still feel like I haven't talked to you enough. I'm gonna have you in again. So let's just kind of go with your Joyful You program. You do retreats. You're doing a book club in January.
This is our brochure.
Yes.
You see them around town. We have a little flyer here. We've got a Lunch and Learn book club series starting in January where people who want to learn from the book, this is the book,
Yes.
On their own can come in around every other Friday and get some support working with me and with other people who are working through the same thing.
Okay.
Some people need a little structure and also a little help.
Yes.
But maybe still want to do most of it on their own. And then we have a mindfulness skills course starting in January for people who want to learn more and start getting a little more structure into how to bring mindfulness into their life. That's based on the techniques from mindfulness-based stress reduction as well as mindfulness-based cognitive therapy. They're almost the same, so we'll customize that a bit. Then there'll be a retreat at Allerton in February to practice that. And then we'll have the Living with Purpose to set your compass again in May. And next fall we'll have Living with Resilience retreat.
All right. And so if someone wants to sign up for the retreats or the book club, where can they go for that information?
That's all on our website at joyful-u.org. Under the programs, you'll see upcoming events page that has all of those. And then we also do workshops, especially like leadership workshops with organizations.
Okay.
Or stress reduction workshops, whatever your organization
Especially this time of year.
That's right. That's right. I've been doing some stress reduction workshops lately.
Well, all right. Barbara Spang-Minsker. Barbara, thank you so very much for coming into the studio.
Thank you.
Joyful You, discovering the path to success and happiness through mindful living with purpose and resilience. And I thank you once again for coming in twice. And I foresee a third time in the future because that was just not enough. We have to continue the discussion on mindfulness, purpose, healing, resilience. Just enjoy.
Well, if you start going through the program, we'll have to talk about how it goes.
Absolutely. I will definitely keep that in mind. So Barbara Spang-Minsker, engineering professor at the University of Illinois and joyful-u.org. You are listening to 90.1 FM WEFT Champaign. I'm your Renee Angelah.